This is LiveWell Talk on understanding shoulder injuries. I'm Dr. Dustin Arnold, Chief Medical Officer at Unity Point Health, St. Luke's Hospital. Whether you're working out at the gym, reaching for the top shelf, or carrying groceries, your shoulders are involved in nearly everything you do, and they are more vulnerable to injury than you may think. Today, we're joined by Brock Yotty, supervisor and physical therapist at St. Luke's Therapy Plus, to break down common shoulder injuries, how to prevent them, and when physical therapy can help. Brock, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Dr. Arnold.
Yeah. I say this all the time. I know you've heard me say this, but I don't think people recognize like how dependent they are on shoulders for walking, for balance. And I just discharged a patient this weekend. I was counseling her and her family on the clavicular fracture in a sling. And I was like, you walk with your arms, and so you really at risk for falling. So be careful when we take all the measures. But can you give us a breakdown of kind of the shoulder's anatomy and function?
Yeah. So, shoulders kind of broken up into, we say 4 joints. One's kind of a floating joint there with your shoulder blade and your rib cage. But, everybody thinks it's just, this nice simple ball and socket joint, but there's a lot more going on there. And it's definitely less stable than we want it to be. But with that, we get that great ability to reach and overhead and do all those fun things that we need to do. The way I always learned it is, it's kind of like a golf ball on a golf tee. That's how little coverage that shoulder has, which is great because it allows us to reach, but there's not a lot of stability there. And so it takes a lot of muscles, a lot of tendons and ligaments and different things to help hold it in place. Yep. So. Yeah,
the rotator cuff is really, muscles and tendons that are holding that in place. Break it down. What are the common shoulder injuries you see first for athletes, and then, because I know you have in the past been involved in a lot of sports medicine, and then non-athletes?
Yeah, so a lot of them tend to be overuse injuries, and we say that, and that's a broad term, obviously. But, tendinitises or shoulder, just muscular strains. We can get that labrum is part of that shoulder joint that makes that socket deeper. Those can get irritated as well. So it can really run the gambit for as far as sports, rotator cuff injuries, whether that's muscular or tendinous, pretty common ones that we see there. You can even get into like wrestling, and they're going to have more labral tears just because that arm gets put into not great positions.
Right.
But for athletes, it's a lot of rotator cuff injuries. And then for non-athletic population, it's that postural, I forward rounded shoulders, and then I go to lift something, carry something, and I feel this, pop, stretch, click, what have you. And then it's hard to move, hard to lift that shoulder, raise things. And then, dealing with whatever that may be, whether it's just a simple strain or a full rotator cuff tear. And those are 2 very different tracks to deal with some of those things.
So somebody comes in, rotator cuff injury, we hear about that a lot, shoulder injury, difficulty moving. How do you differentiate when you're taking a look at them and say, okay, this is a tear, we need to get an MRI, or, this is a strain, let's try some therapy and see how you respond?
Yeah, it's generally their movement patterns. You say, all right, raise your arm up over your head, whether I'm specifically trying to take a measurement or just take a look at it. They're going to pull that shoulder up with that upper trap and try to, get it up there as high as they can. But because that rotator cuff isn't there to help that shoulder glide and get above, roughly 90 degrees, when it's not there to help that rotation, it's just kind of hanging out there.
Thinking
it's like,
tear.
This is not good.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. How do they usually present? What are people usually doing?
It's funny because it can be really anything, but it's, I painted, whether it's ceiling or wall, that repetitive overhead rotation. And then they, sore the next day, don't think anything of it. And then maybe later in the week, say, it's kind of hard picking up that, the coffee mug's kind of the simple one that you think of, and they go to raise it and they're like, it doesn't feel good to rotate it up to your lips or any of those sorts of things. So those are some of those simple daily activities. It's like, this might not be a normal, just, I did too much and I need to walk this one off.
But now I've seen some patients over the years that just have degenerative rotator cuff arthropathy. Yeah, that so they can present with significant injury but not remember the pop.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, no, I mean, that's a pretty common thing. Obviously, as we age, we know that things don't bounce back quite as quickly. And I think that comes back to that postural portion of it that we oftentimes focus on. Because, okay, if I'm in a bad position once, body's pretty good at adapting to that. But when we have that same position repeatedly over and over, those tissues go, I can't hang on anymore. And then it's small tear. And then, okay, without thinking, I rolled over in bed and, I feel it and something's not right, and goes from there.
What people that have had an injury, what do you recommend to prevent re-injury? They've had a rotator cuff strain, they've worked with you. What do you tell them, like, okay, here's what you need to do for maintenance?
Yeah, typically we really hammer home that postural aspect of it. We in our daily lives, what are we typically doing? We're typically sitting like we are right now. Have a laptop, have a phone, have something right in front of us. And so we're looking down. So everything is forward. That shoulder is forward. That's putting a lot of stress on that rotator cuff. And so if it's always in that overstretched position, and then you go to lift a heavy weight, I mean, hold your arm out here for as long as you can. You're not going to be able to hold it nearly as long as if you're next to your body or if it's in a better position. So, we try to get everything into a better position, shoulders back, shoulder blades back. So there's less stress through that rotator cuff, through that shoulder joint itself, to decrease the stress and the consistent stress that goes on through there.
Huh. Yeah, we have bad posture, don't we? I was trying to sit up here a little bit. Yeah. As I said, not necessarily talking about shoulder surgery, whether it's rotator cuff or joint replacement. How recovery from a rotator cuff injury, shoulder injury? What's typical?
I mean, time frame wise, obviously it varies. We're going to bounce back a little bit quicker as we're younger. Going to take a little bit more time as we're older. Every surgeon's got their own protocol, so it's hard to be like, oh, well, it's definitely this. 6 to 8 weeks is that general tissue healing time after surgery. Yeah. So we're going to be pretty cautious with things up to that point. And then after we get to that 6 to 8 weeks, okay, we can start doing some more motions and strengthening. But in that 6 to 8 weeks, we will do some stretching, try to get the motion as good as we can without creating tissue irritation or increased pain or other things like that. Because we want to have those tissues fully stretched out and ready to go once we can start doing strengthening or some of those other things.
Okay.
And then, as far as like timeline, obviously sport dependent, activity dependent, if it's Sally down the street who just needs to be able to walk and carry in her groceries and reach into that overhead cupboard, we probably don't need to do as much strengthening or dynamic strengthening in those overhead positions. If it's your 16-year-old high school pitcher, okay, we probably have a little bit higher demand to make sure that rotator cuff is back to strength, those scapular stabilizers on that backside to be in a good position so they don't put that added stress on there when they are throwing. And even more so there, if they are a pitcher, working on leg strength, core strength, because, we all think of throwing, okay, it's a shoulder. Well, if you're not strong through your legs, strong through your core and producing that power, and you're just trying to do it from your shoulder, I could strengthen all day long, but if we're not using the whole chain, it's really going to put a lot of stress.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with someone a couple nights ago saying that I'm old enough to remember the baseball coach upset that we were lifting weights for football because it would screw up our swing. I mean, and now that just sounds insane, but I mean, at that time, they thought it would bulk you up and you wouldn't be able to swing, and so that whole total body, I
mean, just go look at some of the best pitchers
in
the world. Yeah. Their legs are tree trunks, and they work out core every day, and I mean, they're impressive athletes. It's not just like, well, they're up there and they're spinning it. They're out there working hard.
Although I will point out, they didn't count Nolan Ryan's pitches. He just went out there and threw a game, and just pitched.
Sure.
Now they're like, 65, we better pull him out,
Yeah, I mean,
Nolan Ryan stayed on the mound and just kept throwing heat,
Yeah, there's definitely some genetic lottery type things going on there where, okay, you've got the longevity. I mean, he's 44 up there throwing complete games where, we can't get 27-year-olds, but that's a different conversation for a different day.
There's a clip on the internet where he throws like the opening pitch to some game for the Angels, and I mean it's or the Rangers, excuse me, and it's just he still at his.
I was saying he was like 65,
yeah,
through like 80 something.
Yeah,
This is silly.
Well, and they also say that because the speed is when they used to measure the speed across the plate, not when it left the hand. Now with computer and AI and all that, they can tell you the speed when they left it. So they think he consistently is above 100.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite baseball players. Well, if someone's interested in getting into physical therapy or sports therapy services, how do they do that?
I mean, obviously, if we had an injury, we want to go see our primary care doctor, make sure that there isn't something else going on. A lot of times they'll start with probably an x-ray to begin with, pretty standard there. And then they'll write a referral over to us with, shoulder pain, shoulder injury, what have you. And then we'll go through our evaluation, determine, this is what we feel like the cause is, find those areas of weakness that we can address, and, set up a plan of care moving forward for them. I know the hard part is with our athletes, usually the injury happens in season, so they want to get back as quickly as possible.
I've had that conversation with you. I've had that conversation with other athletic trainers, physical therapists, that the high school season's so short. They want a miracle. And sometimes, honestly, the athlete will doctor shop until they get someone to tell them what they want to hear. And that's frustrating.
I mean, all you can do is give them the best information available.
That's all.
They're going to do what they're going to do. So I could say, hey, you probably good to take the next 3 weeks off so we could be ready for the end of the season rather than try to worry about these 3 weeks. But
3 weeks
when you're 16, that doesn't sound great.
That's an eternity. Brock, thanks again for joining me and sharing your expertise on common shoulder injuries and how therapy can help them. Once again, this is Brock Yotty, supervisor and physical therapist at St. Luke's Therapy Plus. If you're experiencing shoulder pain or just want to explore your options for care, the team at St. Luke's Therapy Plus is here to help. Visit unitypoint.org to learn more. Thank you for listening to LiveWell Talk On. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your family, friends, neighbors, strangers about our podcast. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, or wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, be well.